Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
This week, new agriculture policies are signed into law, and a long-serving state employee who helped to oversee the state capitol renovation retires. The DFL pushes for an orderly end to the eviction moratorium and a look back at the 2021 session. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. Several new agriculture policies were recently signed into law by Governor Walz. Senator Torrey Westrom is the chair of the Senate Agriculture and Rural Development Finance and Policy Committee, and I spoke with him this week. The policy provisions of the Agriculture Omnibus Bill were among the winners of the regular session because they were passed and signed into law. On the Senate floor, you said, "We find agreement because we all like to eat." One of the new laws concerns the cottage food industry. What are some of the changes?
Well, Shannon, the cottage food industry is something that's really flourished in the state of Minnesota. Think of this as grandma's pickles at the church bazaar, a young aspiring cook that does a part-time job or cooks in the evening or weekends to show neighbors or friends in the community some of their great cooking talents, whether it's their jams, whether it's cupcakes or special cakes or breads, any of that. Cottage food industry is what we call that, from the canned pickles, jams, and others at the church bazaars or local festivals that people like to sell. 20 some years ago, there became an issue with requiring more and more inspections and commercial kitchens of these small entrepreneurial businesses that really didn't see themselves as a big business. Church bazaars, for example, have been going on for years and years. And the requirement of the licensing and the inspections and the commercial kitchens were looking to put these people out of business over what many people would say are not common sense policies. And so the House of Representatives, former Representative Al Junkie, I remember, helped lead the charge, myself and others, to make sure there's an exemption for the cottage food, the new entrepreneur that's just starting out and doing this oftentimes in their own kitchen with family or neighbors. And so the cottage food industry has flourished since then. There's over 5,000 licensees in the state of Minnesota. We have 2 tiers, and the first tier is set at a threshold of under $5,000 a year of sales. The second tier was $18,000 of sales. So it's, as you can tell, it's the small sole proprietor, small business. What we did this year was update those numbers. The second tier is going to have some additional training that they partake in. There is a continued $50 fee, which they were previously paying, but they can go up to $78,000 of gross sales in their business. As they continue to grow, they can maybe become a sole proprietor out of it as maybe a full-time job. And that's what the Ag Committee heard as some of the concerns. People were having a tough time being able to quit their regular jobs and move full-time into being a small business. But if they go beyond that, then they have to do more commercial kitchens and inspections. And that's what many of these do as they grow. But they need to have a place to flourish and incubate and grow to begin with. And so the first tier, will also be updated for inflation as of January of next year. So those are some of the changes.
So you're going to make that a little bit easier for them. Let's talk about hunters for a minute, because there's a change that would allow what you referred to as the garage guys to be able to process deer or other wild game on a part-time basis. Was this not allowed before, and how will it be different now?
Well, that was another provision in our bill. And let me just touch on 2 quick other points in the cottage food industry, and then the garage guys. 2 other changes. One, those small cottage food industry folks can also use an LLC as a business. that was not allowed prior. And so we've allowed that and expanded that business opportunity. Secondly, they can also get into pet treats. Working through the Department of Agriculture, they can offer pet treats as part of their small cottage food business. We also did the wild game processors, known as the garage guys. What was happening there in the last few years, the inspections had been added to these wild game part-time processors. Many of us would think of them as folks that debone the deer or take the hides off the deer and then give hunters their meat back. But it's the gory, icky parts of hunting, the cleaning out the deer and deboning the meat. Very gross, and if you've ever done it, but it's part of reality, part of life, part of hunting. And so this just allows those that don't do this full-time, part-time, up to $20,000 a year for wild game like ducks or pheasants, or up to 200 deer. They can do it in their garage just like they've done and not be subject to commercial kitchen inspections, which was part of the changes that were happening from a couple of years ago, and that wasn't intended.
And is there any concern at all about chronic wasting disease? If deer are taken from those management zones, can they ensure proper disposal? There
is, and that was a piece of the provision that we negotiated through in deer that are processed by wild game processors or garage guys, if you will. They need to dispose of those deer the same way any other hunter in that endemic zone would have to. So if they're in an endemic zone, which a handful of counties in Minnesota are, they would have to process those or put them in a dumpster, a DNR dumpster. And that's the same requirement that hunters that take deer in those areas have to follow as well. And we made sure that the garage guys would do the same process, same disposal to deal with the concern of chronic wasting disease.
Before this bill became law, an EMT or a paramedic could have been charged with a gross misdemeanor for treating a canine police dog injured in the line of duty. I assume this was an easy law to change?
This was a common sense law to change. When this was brought to Senator Matthews in the Senate and members in the House of Representatives, our Ag Committee oversees the veterinary practice in the state of Minnesota. But even the veterinarians were supportive of making this common sense change because they're not on the scene. And if that immediate medical attention wouldn't be administered to a police dog, many times they would be deceased. And so it was just common sense to make this provision in law that would kind of work like a Good Samaritan law does in Minnesota. And if they need to administer some life-saving help to those police dogs temporarily till they can get to a veterinarian or a place of operation, that's what they can do and not be subject to criminal or other penalties under the law.
Now, finally, before we have to go, negotiations with the House on the omnibus agriculture budget are ongoing. And while consensus has been reached on these policies, we're still waiting for an agreement on the numbers. Without jeopardizing your talks, what are some of the sticking points that you're trying to work through?
Our agriculture bill is mostly wrapped up on the finance areas. We are very close. Chair Sundin and the House of Representatives, myself, and our conferees and our Ag Committee members have been working through those numbers. Once the House and Senate leadership were able to set the targets, along with the governor's office, by May 17th, just at the adjournment of session, we've now worked through those numbers and have general agreement that will be coming out real soon. But broadband is one of them. We've come up to agreement on that. Rural broadband is under our funding jurisdiction as well. We're going to have, and that's a public number, $70 million over the next 2 years added into rural broadband. That's the biggest number we've injected into rural broadband in the state of Minnesota's program. And so we're excited about that because we want to get those unserved areas of broadband served. And so the House Chair and myself are working through that. Again, everybody in Minnesota likes to eat, legislators like to eat. And so that's why agriculture, oftentimes we can come to agreement real quick because we all enjoy the great food that our farmers provide for us and make sure our state is well fed.
Senator Torrey Westrom, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate the opportunity.
DFL lawmakers and housing advocates called a press conference to highlight the need for an orderly end to the eviction moratorium.
Some of the first closures were bars, restaurants, retail, and we know what those workers make an hour. They are probably a group of workers who are one paycheck away from not being able to pay their bills. The governor quickly determined he did not want any more homeless people at that particular point, and quickly called for the eviction moratorium. We quickly realized he wasn't forgiving rent, which meant their bills would just continue to be added up. And so in the first go-round, we had $100 million housing assistance that we worked hard to get out the door because we wanted to protect the tenants, but also the landlords who had bills to pay. And so that particular piece happened. Now we're nearing the end. But there are, I think I just read, 69,000 households in Minnesota who owe more than $214 million in back rent. And that means we have to be very careful about how we move out of this.
It is vital that we come to a deal on an orderly and clear off-ramp from the eviction moratorium. In addition to providing that appropriate time to make sure that people and landlords get the rental assistance they need, we also need to make sure that renters' housing records do not become even more collateral damage in this pandemic. In Minnesota, once a landlord files an eviction, that record sticks to a person's file for years to come. The record does not fall away even when the renter prevails or the judge dismisses the case for other reasons. It comes up again and again that the person was, quote unquote, evicted, even though that may never have been the case.
I had 3 homeless camps within walking distance from my house last summer, so I know how precarious housing can be and how even with the eviction moratorium, we still had a large homeless population and problem that continues to grow. So we need, as Representative Abaje said, we need an orderly process to end this eviction moratorium. I've had conversations with the courts, with counties, with city officials, with landlords, and with tenants, and everybody wants that process to go through. We have all this federal money, as you've heard. We need people to go to renthelpmn.org, apply for that money, because we want to keep people in their housing.
We are not going to allow a pandemic affect the trajectory of Minnesotans' lives. That is why we absolutely need to reach a legislative compromise on an eviction moratorium off-ramp, one that prevents evictions and allows resources to flow to landlords. This is truly a win-win for renters and landlords. And let me just explain one piece of this. Because of the over $500 million in federal resources passed, we have the resources available to help Minnesotans get their heads above water and make sure that there aren't lasting ramifications of the pandemic. If we have a wave of evictions, those landlords will not be able to access those resources. The law passed in Congress specifically says that Minnesotans, renters need to stay housed for landlords to be able to access those resources. That's why it's so vital that we have an eviction moratorium off-ramp that provides a window of time for assistance to flow, and that we have communication between landlords and renters to ensure that resources will flow.
Mandell has spent half of his life working for the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board and will be retiring from his role as Executive Secretary at the end of June. I spoke with him this week about his years of service to the state. You've spent nearly 34 years working for the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board. What initially drew you to this kind of work?
Well, first of all, it was a planning job. I was doing some community organizing, and my college and graduate degree were both in city planning. And so that was the first tug. And then just having grown up out east and worked in DC for the feds, the fact that I was going to be able to work here at the Capitol in such a beautiful setting at the seat of government was just something I was just like, in fact, to get the job, I came in and met with the then exec sec about 5 times just to try to convince him to hire me.
So it's been a long time. You're preparing to retire, and you have had a hand in more projects than I can name. Buildings like the Minnesota History Center, memorials like Vietnam and women's suffrage, the restoration of the Minnesota State Capitol, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, the light rail line through the Capitol complex. Which of these multitude of projects has been most meaningful to you?
Well, there's no denying that the Capitol restoration was such a legacy project and such a historic project and such a, I mean, just because of the enormity of it, the time involved, and then working with all the different artisans, that was something that, I mean, it drove my decisions to not retire earlier for several years. And then when I got the executive secretary position, that drove it further down the timeline. But I have to say that the ones that were most meaningful was working with the memorial projects, when I'd be working intimately for several years at a time with Minnesota citizens, you know, be it the Hmong or the Korean veterans or the Vietnam veterans, who had such a passion, and we were working on intimate details through the design competition, through the design evolution, and getting to know those individuals and seeing the passion they had and seeing the celebration that they had on completing it is the thing that touched my heart the most, for sure.
In your retirement letter, you spoke of this position as being intimately tied to the history and governance of the state. Can you expand on what you mean?
Well, like I said, when I was working in DC, I was working, you know, in government, but pretty much behind the scenes. Coming here, working in this kind of a visible, highly politically charged environment, needing to work through community engagement, public engagement, developing relationships with legislators and governors and lieutenant governors and agency heads. It was, I have to believe it was a job made for me, and I could never have imagined when I was going through my graduate degree and then experiencing unemployment for the first year afterwards, that I would land such a perfect job. It was just political enough. It was, it opened me up to work in design fields and such, and working with architects and engineers and planners and designers down to the artists. I couldn't have asked for a better job to spend actually half my life, because I'm now 69 years old.
Well, you know, it is a broad skill set that you have. I mean, you have to have diplomacy, you have to have an understanding of art and architecture and history and all of those things. And then, as you mentioned before, sort of the culmination of all of those things was the restoration and modernization of the state capitol. It's been a few years since that grand reopening. Did the renovation achieve all the goals that were desired?
I would say an emphatic yes to that. The 3 overarching principles that we had were architectural integrity, which was the Cap Board #1 charge, the effective building function of a state building so that we could bring it into the 21st century, and then life safety and accessibility. The fact that we opened up over 30,000 square feet to the public for the first time, that we had now fire controls and lighting controls and mechanical and electrical, so that we have zone heating and cooling and such. We definitely accomplished what we needed to do. I knew it was going to be more expensive. And, you know, we had our effort that we mounted in 2001 that failed. We had an effort in 2005 at the centennial of the building that never got approved. But the minute they started digging that first hole in the basement, I knew they were committed. There continues to be, of course, with an old building of marble, where water is the #1 enemy, we continue to have issues, and we will have to continue to monitor the plaster and the beautiful art paintings on the walls, because there is some delamination happening, and there is some investigation already going on as to what needs to be repaired 3 years later. And they'll have to maintain the building. They'll have to, check for the caulking and the ceiling on all the dome, because those 8-foot blocks of marble move. But did we accomplish what we set out to do? Emphatically, yes. And I thank Governor Dayton and all the other leaders that had a hand in that.
The state and the country are in the midst of a conversation about how historical information is presented. We've seen it play out in the Capitol complex with the removal of the 2 paintings from the governor's reception room due to their portrayal of Indigenous people. Those paintings are now in the Cass Gilbert Library on the 3rd floor, one of the new public spaces that was created, along with interpretive panels. We've also seen the toppling of the Christopher Columbus statue. How do you view these events?
Well, we also had 2 historic paintings removed from the Capitol: the battle at Killdeer Mountain and the New Ulm. And those are in the possession of the Historical Society now. I think the Lieutenant Governor sums it up best when she says, to the effect that we want to make sure that the Capitol building, the state's most public building, is a welcoming place for all its citizens, and that it tells a more inclusive history. I have my own personal preferences that I hope we elaborate on the history rather than removing pieces. But I think our Capitol, the rotunda and a lot of those spaces was a snapshot in time. I mean, it was dedicated, in many ways to the Civil War. And when the Governor Dayton had his issues with just being surrounded by Civil War art, I mean, he had a very good point that is not very inclusive. It doesn't show Minnesota today. So I don't think there's anything wrong, and working with the task forces this past 6 months has been very, very positive. They started not from scratch, but from what we had in our documents and policies, and built on that so that we now have reinterpretation, modification, or if necessary, removal. And I would favor the 2 former ones rather than removal, unless, of course, Columbus is its own case in point. That will have to be with the task force reports once they're accepted. That'll probably have to be the first task that the board still is in charge and still in the driver's seat, would have to address. But of course, he never came to Minnesota.
Right. What challenges will the next executive secretary face? I mean, I feel like you're kind of laying some of them out right now. And what advice do you have?
Well, there's always the budget issues. We are a very small board, 2 to 3 people, and we probably have, our role and the authority and the responsibilities we've been given by the legislature are far greater than a body our size should be expected to handle. And I know there's always going to be budget pressures, but with, for instance, the art subcommittee work now going on, not to mention the 17-acre Sears site, if that starts to get redeveloped, planning bodies 3 times our size can't handle a project that size. And for the 2 to 3 people that will still be here, working within a very, very tight budget where things are always increasing in cost, will depend on partnerships and a lot more cooperation, not just from the state and the city, but a lot more of a public-private partnership. But I think, the budget will be an overriding issue if things get to be as busy as I expect they will be in the next decade.
Paul Mandell, it has been a pleasure getting to know you over these years. I have enjoyed your voluminous knowledge of everything that we've talked about, and I wish you all the best in your retirement.
Thank you so very much. It's been a pleasure working with you too.
All legislative sessions are historic, but the 2021 legislative session was especially so, as the world wrestled with a global pandemic and the session began with social distancing, mask wearing, and remote work. Here's a look at some of the images of the 2021 session as captured by Senate photographers A.J. Olmscheid and Catherine J. Davis. Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.